first, what is TEE? I was trying to challenge you guys. Okay, let's get back to the topic of restaking, which is, I guess, easier. Okay, I would like to have our panelists to first introduce themselves.
Sure, I'm Altan, one of the founders of Nuffle. So we started building Nuffle within Near and spun out 3 months ago. We have 3 products that we're building. Near DA was the first one. The second thing is a Nuffle personality layer that's on EigenLayer, that's currently on testnet. And we just announced last week that we'll extend EigenLayer outside of Ethereum R1 to introduce data assets. So those are the 3 products that we have in there.
Hi, Anurag, co-founder of Avail. Previously, I also founded Polygon. Avail actually we started within Polygon back in 2020, spun it out last year. What is Avail? At Avail we build infrastructure for the rollup-centric roadmap, which we think is how future blockchains will evolve. So we build components across scalability, interoperability, and security as well.
Hey guys, I'm Vyas, one of the founding members of EigenLayer. We're building a platform by which we want to expand the scope of the Ethereum ecosystem and essentially expand the scope of decentralized SaaS.
Thank you. Very valuable SaaS as well, right? Okay, so let's get to our first question. I think everybody here knows about restaking. Restaking allows users to get economic security on demand. So what are the helpful ways to measure or price crypto economic costs relative to cryptographic integrity, which is unconditional? Do you want to take this question? Yes?
I think pricing itself is very difficult. We're dealing with it symbiotic. Everybody who's working on restaking, Jito as well, it's very hard to determine exactly how much security a protocol actually needs. The alternative, however, to not using restaking and not bootstrapping yourself with the economic security of a much more stable asset like Ethereum is, one, you have to do the bootstrapping yourself, right, which requires its own, quite intense development, marketing, community development, and, as well as the token costs. Right? And then the other attribute to that is when your entire economic security is determined in your own asset, depending on the type of protocol you are, when you go through moments of vulnerability, sometimes that can lead to debt spirals, right? We saw this in the previous cycle with things like bridges, where during bridge exploits, where the entire security of the bridge was determined in the native token, you saw where token prices started to dump, and therefore the amount of security you have also dumps, and it leads to this toxic cyclical debt spiral. So is it hard to price in exactly how much a protocol needs for security today? Yes. On the flip side, it's cheaper than the alternative.
Yeah, I can build up on the alternative maybe. So one of the reasons, I guess, our journey started Near. So when you're bootstrapping security for Near, you're actually paying a lot of money. So Near pays almost 9% to the validators. So if you do the math, right, 4 billion worth Near, that gets a lot of money. So it's gets you to almost 350 to 400 million to be printed to give it back to the validators. And this is why we like the approach of EigenLayer and wanted to build there, because you're not paying that much, even though you're paying basis points worth of sort of cryptographic security back to restakers. And that's why we got excited to be able to kind of build something quite fast in 3 to 6 months period, rather than everyone go through this 1 or 2 year period of building the whole infrastructure and the kind of the bootstrapping security. So that's how we see the way how we came work.
Sorry, don't mean to interrupt you, Anurag, but I just want to add that we're not recommending that you not deploy your own native token either, right? It's not binary. It's definitely choose the sum of all the best options in the aggregate. And the initial bootstrapping may be through EigenLayer, but at some point projects should have their own token to reward, govern, and have self-governance, right? These two things are mutually exclusive.
And there's still staking programs enabled by EigenLayer platform, so you are not forced to just use Ethereum and Eigen token. You can also have your own token as part of the quorum.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, so here's my take on it, right? Like, certainly agree that bootstrapping is hard for any ecosystem. So how we see this at Avail is, if you look at Avail, it's a infrastructure, it's a blockchain for other blockchains, for rollups on top. And rollups essentially inherit the shared security of the base layer. And so what we do is, the bootstrapping we start with the Avail native token, but we have this component called fusion where we kind of allow for staking of other assets like ETH and others in general. And so I think the bootstrapping thing certainly for a blockchain like ours certainly makes sense, because we remember you have to kind of also kind of maintain that balance between the value accrual of your own native token and the bootstrapping element that is coming from an existing asset like ETH or BTC or anything like that. Because if you do not focus on the value of your own token, it's very hard to then pay for the security that is brought by ETH, BTC for example. Because essentially, cryptocurrency security does not come for free from, let's say, EigenLayer or Symbiotic or any of the other platforms, right? You have to budget, like in my estimate, anything between 3 to 5% annual yield for the people who are putting that capital. And ETH is an already mature asset, BTC is a mature asset, and that means that you have to pay that much in dollar terms. It can be pretty big. So a $1 billion economic stake will set you back by about like $50 million if you take 5%. Right? So I mean, you have to kind of very carefully model the economy and which solution you are looking for. So you have to ensure this balance between the native token. So how we do it at Avail is we started with the native token staking. We progressively are going to add other assets like ETH and BTC via Fusion, and the rollups on top inherit this combined security. They don't have to pay for a partial sort of security. The entire security of the Avail base layer is inherited by the rollups on top. They just have to pay fees for using Avail.
That's a consensus, right? For the tokens to be staked. I guess Avail token plus ETH.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you're also touching on one thing really important here, which is like the elasticity in relation to the amount of security that you need, right? It really varies on I think the underlying value of transactions that exist inside your protocol and your ecosystem, right? If you're a rollup only doing, let's just say $50 million in volume a year, you shouldn't be paying for $1 billion of security, right? That's incredibly ludicrous. So there has to be this elastic effect of, hey, as I need more security, I can adopt it, and as I maybe need less, you can release it back to the open market and allow other services to essentially corroborate that, right?
Well, in theory, I mean, I agree with you. But there are various other things that are non-financial in nature, which cannot be expressed by a value. I mean, so when you do a lot of message passing, when you do, it's not necessarily TVL at stake. For financial applications, this makes sense. We can, measure that. But there will be a lot of non-financial applications which don't fall into this. So that's why it's a tricky thing.
Absolutely.
Just complete.
Cool. So we have touched on the demand side of things, on the yield and reward side. Now let's look at the supply side, which is the ABSs. What do you think would be the next crop of category-defining ABSs look like? What kind of apps do you think are better fitting as an ABS? Yes?
Yeah, I think there's a few different areas that we're excited about, right? I think two-part answer. Part one would be, everybody's talking about an overabundance of infrastructure and how are we going to onboard the next generation of on-chain users. So the reality is like we're going to need more like consumer-driven applications. Like Anurag said, these are going to be like perhaps less financially driven. They're going to be more community-driven. They're going to have different value propositions. So I think like that's part one. Excited to support like modular social identity layers, decentralized ID, things like that, which are going to be really important for our space. The other part is I'm actually really bullish on decentralized AI as like slightly somebody who sees things sometimes from a, where is the world going in the direction of AGI? The reality is we're going to have malicious actors who are going to contribute, rogue data sets and train rogue models and create rogue agents. And we need ways to verify, identify, and slash these people for their misbehavior, as well as like come up with, one of the things that we're working on at Eigen is like Eigen insurance for bridging, but like that eventually could get applied to how do we use insurance to essentially, recover assets for aggrieved parties, or like use the slash funds to be able to, objectively attribute and redistribute these. Grieved assets to original users and token holders.
Yeah, there's two things I'm excited about, guys. There's a lot of infrastructure that's being built as a ADS, but I've been reading and learning more about the DeFi side. So I've seen I think one that was designing a Uniswap V4 as an ADS. And the other thing I'm excited about that I have a friend who's building an ADS on EigenLayer is like a decentralized order book and using the ADS, using cryptographic security to ensure that the orders are verified is very interesting. But yeah, DeFi as a whole, I think, could take some of the concept that we've been building and decentralize it with restaking.
Yeah, I'll not say, I don't have examples of ABSs, but like certainly rollups as verifiable servers in general. The most bullish things I am on these constructions which actually embed blockchain-like things in existing customer flows. So I mean, what I want to really say is that till now blockchains have been in this sort of closed ecosystem where users are expected to kind of on-ramp, like come to our ecosystem and then use all this fancy tech. What we've been kind of observing, and if you see like examples of, let's say, the Ton ecosystem, like people are excited about it. Why are people excited about Ton? Because Telegram has users, and so when you're taking the blockchain technology to where the users are, that is where like a lot of action and excitement is coming from. And so the general principle that I'm kind of looking forward to is how can we kind of bundle blockchain technology, and instead of expecting users to come here, how can we package this, put it into existing user workflows, existing distribution flows? Not only Telegram, but how can we put it into social apps, for example, like various other, distribution places. So that kind of tech, I'm pretty bullish on, for example. So just for example, we have a roll-up stack that is developing on us, and this is called Stacker, which is basically, helps us to write a roll-up in, let's say, TypeScript or even Python. And so that is bringing in a lot of web to traditional developers to build stuff that is beyond the DeFi, the social gaming, stuff like that. Like something like Lens is helping, unbundle social media as we see, for example. So yeah.
I totally agree with you. I don't mean to be like pedantic about like your word choice or anything. You said fancy tech, and I agree it's fancy, but the reality is like consumers don't care. Like the real consumers, it's like too much obfuscation. It's like friction is too high. Like we need to solve some of these problems, and I think that's your like main point here, right? Like I don't want to click through my ledger 30 times to like sign all the fields before like I need to do a transaction. That's like broken UX, right? Like or if I need to have a specific wallet for one app that doesn't work with another app, like these are things that are broken about our space that we need to resolve before we like. Eventually, actually, all of the infra that we're building on stage should be completely abstracted away and like users don't realize that like, oh, when I sign in with Google on Spotify, OAuth does it. Okay, but it just works, it just happens. Like, it doesn't matter who performed that SaaS solution, which is why like we think of it as decentralized verifiable SaaS, because that's what we're building.
Yeah, I mean, I was in this panel the other day, this question was asked about how will people view security of each solution that they are on. I said that they don't need to know. Because essentially, like if you look at like something like email, like there is a separate segment for Gmail, there is a separate segment for Proton Mail, and there is a niche set of people who run their own mail server. So I mean, right now, if you kind of see, we are in that stage where everything is power user UX. Like you have MetaMask with option to switch to 100 chain or whatever, and so that's not going to work for if you want to go mainstream. And we don't need to kind of have this uniform view for all users, right? Like there will always be UX for power users. Someone wants to run their own mail server, will run their mail server.
And they'll figure out a way to do it, even if you don't build it. Like, they'll make it happen. Like, that's the point of a power user.
Yeah, but I mean, you cannot expect everyone to do that.
Absolutely.
So there will be run your own mail server, a Proton Mail, and like Gmail.
So I'll take the other view. So the problem like that, I really like the vision of building for everyone. But the only problem is like Amazon, for example, doesn't get impacted by an E price or BTC price or any of these, right? So we as a sort of like almost like a crypto society, or we get impacted by everything that price changes and like, oh, like this price went up. So that's something that we need to solve to get there. Like if you're building a ETH rollup, you get impacted by the ETH rollup, then devs think about it versus devs build on Amazon that don't care about the stock price of Amazon. So maybe that's the mindset, like something that we need to solve as a sort of a crypto focus, right?
Yeah, I see where you're coming from. Like I think the Solana ecosystem also has like a really good way of looking at this, right? Like Phantom is a great example of this in my opinion, because it's kind of universal. You have one wallet that works everywhere, or like they have certain primitives that they double down on, and like this is where I think one of the pitfalls of the Ethereum community sometimes is like the realities of how credible neutrality is implemented, and Ethereum is taking one position, Solana is taking a counter position, and we can see how that impacts the community growth. We can see how that impacts what I describe as this like vocal aggregation effect, where like for me in the last 6 months to a year on crypto Twitter, it feels like everyone in the ETH2 community is fighting with each other for the same resources, devs, users, etc., etc. Whereas you look at the Solana community, anytime there's an announcement, there's this like beautiful aggregation effect that still happens in this amplification. So like we need to like return to that sort of a mentality where like, hey, what are we all doing for the total addressable market, not individual, and then therefore, yeah, exactly, and then the trickle down effect is like rising tides lift all boats, right?
Yeah, I mean.
Sorry for getting all of you gentlemen here.
We're
We're running